So back to Adorno and for the last few sentences, and he's going to wrap up this notion of restitution, of giving back to that which was destroyed or damaged by history, and he'll bring it back to an active subject. And precisely this rendering of compensation for past violence, precisely this sets it free from the appearance, shine, of its absolute being for itself. This latter, for its part, is the product of the identifying thought, which, the more it devalues a thing to the mere example of its kind or species, the more it imagines that it has it as such, without subjective addition. And there are a couple things happening here. Precisely this sets it free from the appearance, and the shine is a almost untranslatable German term. It means appearance, but it also means like a note or a bill, like a financial bill. You could almost translate it today as like credit derivative. You know, literally it's like a credit derivative of the intellect. Like this promise that it will have some value in some actual payment sometime in the future. There's that kind of speculative ring to it. So it's precisely this restitution which sets it free from this kind of financialization, or the logic of financialization. And this financialization, is the product of identifying thought, which the more it devalues a thing to the mere example, to the mere serial number, to a mere model among other models, the more it imagines that it has it as such without subjective addition. So this whole kind of reifying thought of that it's just models or exemplars or whatnot, and failing to consider that actually no, each of those things has is an object in its own right and needs to be thought through in its very local specificity, including the objects that we call people. People are objects, they're others to us, and that we have to respect them and think about their situation and the specificity of that. So the failure would be this, to go too abstract too quickly and say that, oh, we'll just dissolve it into this universal democracy or sublime, that, oh, we're all free to shop online nowadays, and assume that there are no contradictions. And Adorno is saying, no, actually, the restitution happens by holding true to the specific. Holding true to what that specific could yet someday be. Maybe it isn't. Maybe it's still trapped by its prehistory, but maybe, just maybe, someday, people will find a way to change. And the society will change. And we have to hold out the hope of that non-identity, of that non-being, that being yet to be, of what might be, what has not begun, but maybe in the process of becoming. We have to hold on to that hope, because that's the only way to live. That's the only way anything good will happen out of human history. Last point would be this. Adorno is on to something when he talks about a logic of resistance which is not violent or destructive, or, worst of all, self-destructive. The dialectic des Zerfalls in German, or the dialectic of disassembly, as I've translated it, or you could translate in other ways. And if someone has a better way of translating it, be my guest. The German is it's simple and yet very profound and resonant, but the idea is disassembly, taking something apart. And almost in the sense of like taking apart a ticking time bomb or something that has tremendous destructive potential. And there's some interesting links with the post-1968 social movements, which by and large are not built upon centralized structures of violence and hierarchy and authority, but they're much more decentralized. They emphasize civil rights, dialogue, consensus, debate, discussion, protest. And they have their problems and issues, but there's something very deep in those social movements which is about consensus on a very broad scale and in democratic contestation and practice. The practice of democracy at a very sort of granular level, which precludes, crazy dictatorships and authoritarian power structures of whatever stripe, wherever they are in the world system. So Adorno's onto something. Adorno's not a political scientist in that respect. I mean, he's a thinker and a philosopher, but there's a way in which a dialectic of disassembly, this is urgently needed today, particularly in the United States of America. We need a dialectic of disassembly because we need to start to take apart the failing machinery of this empire. It's not doing us any good, the empire. These structures are just sort of leeching us dry and taking our resources and giving us nothing in return except misery and a lower standard of living. And we need to start to take them apart. And my hope is, my utopian, maybe foolish hope, is that Americans have some sense and kind of look at some other countries which have gone through some major political changes and gone from autocracy to some level of democracy and ask, how could we do that? Maybe there are things about our own society which are deeply undemocratic, polarization of wealth and so forth, political power, authority, and we need to become more democratic. How does that happen? Well, we need to start to take apart the system that we have in a non-violent fashion through consensus and dialogue and contestation and a whole new range of social movements by ordinary people all across this country, and hopefully linking up with other social movements and democracy movements and workers' movements across the rest of the planet. That's the utopian hope, and hopefully something like that will happen in the future.